Hey guys, welcome back. So in the last video we got ourselves ready to start coding JavaScript, and we've been able to set up our development environment, and we want to start writing JavaScript code. Now what I recommend is that you follow along, code along. That's how you get the best out of this playlist. Don't just sit back and watch it like a movie. You're gonna think you're learning, but you're not really learning anything. So just make sure you code along, and yeah, that's how you get the best from watching this, or from this playlist. Okay, so let's start with let's start with variables. So this is what we're going to cover. I'm going to start off with variables, and then we're going to talk about data types, and then we're going to talk about operators, and we'll talk about conditional statements, and then we'll talk about loops and functions. Okay, so let's start with variables. So variables in programming generally is one way to represent data. It's very fundamental, and different programming languages have different ways of implementing variables or declaring variables. And in JavaScript, declaring variables is as simple as you introduce a variable declaration, a keyword, and then you put the name of the variable. So in this case, it's going to be so let's say username, and then let's just say name, not username. Let's just say name, and we're gonna say Mac. Okay, and then we're gonna save it. Cool. So a couple of things I want you to notice here. So it starts with the keyword, then the variable name, and then the assignment operator. Now this is an assignment operator. This is not an equality sign. And then you have the value. Okay, so that's the syntax for naming variable, or for declaring variables in JavaScript and assigning value to that variable. So it is possible to declare a variable and not assign a value to it immediately. For instance, I can just say var name. So this is still a valid JavaScript statement. So what I've done is I have initialized the variable, but I haven't assigned any value to it yet. To assign a value, I follow it with the assignment operator, and then I put the value. Okay, so think about variables as a container. All right, so when you create variables in JavaScript, so what you're basically doing, think of it as packaging a value inside a container and then putting a label on it, so that when you need that content that is inside that container, you just look for a container. Usually there are lots of containers, so you just look for the container that has that particular label, and then once you do, you have access to the content inside it. So think of variable as that container, think of the name as that label, think of the value as that thing inside it, inside that container. Okay, so that's how you think of variables. So basically what you do when you create a variable is you are storing that data in computer's memory, and when you need that information, you just reach out for it by referencing that variable by name. Okay, so I'm going to show you how that is done shortly. Okay, so let's say you want to actually get what is stored in this variable. So let's say console.log, and then I can say name, and then I save, and I'm gonna just go to the console, and you see on this it says Mark. Okay, so just by referencing the name of the variable, you get the value that's stored in it, which is Mark. So that's what variable is useful for. So JavaScript has a couple of other keywords for declaring variables, and that is const, actually let's, and consts. Okay, so this one is associated with an older version of JavaScript, that is var, so we're going to knock it out. We're not going to be using it, but you can use let. So let is more, it's associated with a more modern version of JavaScript, so we can say name, let's name, and still going to be mark, and then I'm going to save. I'm coming to const shortly. So yep, looking at console, it still says Mac, which means this still works. So we can also do const name, and it's gonna be assigned to Mac. Okay, and I look in the console, it still says Mac. Cool. So the thing is, if I can use either let or const to declare my variable, how do I know which one to use when? So it turns out that they have some subtle differences, but always use const. Maybe not always, but by default use const to declare variables, and use let only when you have to, and I'm going to show you when you might want to consider using let. So let's take, for instance, I have this, and then I say name. Ignore this, don't worry about this for now. So I say name max, and then I log name. So pay close attention to what's going on here. So I have a variable name, and then the value is mark, and then I declare the variable using the let keyword, and then I come here and then I change, you know what, I'm going to call this first name. Okay, cool. So still the same, I only changed the variable name, like I only changed the variable name, which is like the label. Everything stays the same. Okay, so so this is going to be first name, and I save it. So pay attention to what's going on here. What I get in the console says max. So but when I initially declared the variable on line 2, I said it's Mac, and then I come on line 3, I say first name, and then I assign it to max. So what's going on here is that even though I initially assigned Mac to the first name variable when I first created it, down the line in my code I was still able to reassign a different value to the same variable name. So this is only possible because I used the let keyword. Okay, this is really something you should do only when you have to, because this can cause really unexpected behavior in your code. So imagine that you have used let to declare a variable called mark, and down the line in your code, without knowing, you assigned a different value to the same variable name, and unknown to you, you are thinking that your variable name, first name, is still holding mark, and then you want to access the value, not knowing that the value has changed. Now it's going to be really it's going to be really bad. So that is why you should use let keyword only when you have to. Now the const keyword will guard against something like this. So you cannot reassign a different value to a variable name that you've created using the const keyword. Okay, so excuse me. So let's try this same thing using const. And so let's save it. So what I have is const first name mark, and then I try to assign max to the same variable name. So let me reload this page and let's see what happens. and then I do console.log first name. Okay, and so I get an error. I get an error here that says uncaught type error, assignment to a constant variable. So what this is saying is you are trying to assign a different value to a variable that you declared using the const keyword. That's what it means by constant variable. So this is a lot safer because you are not going to be able to accidentally assign a different value to a variable you've previously created. Okay, so that's why I said always use const by default to declare your variables, except for when you are sure, because there are some cases where actually you need to reassign a different value to a variable name. So only in those cases should you use let, but by default go with const. I hope that makes sense. Excuse me. So there are other differences between the const, the variable you declared with the const keyword, and the ones you declare with the let keyword, but this is what I need you to um, focus on for now. This is what you need to remember at this point. Maybe as we go on, we talk about the other differences. Okay, so now that we know how to name variables, there are a couple of things you need to think about when you are thinking of variables. Think about three things basically: the variable name, the value, and the data type of the value. So we're gonna talk. We've already talked about the name. So that's the name that you give the variable. In this case, it is first name. The value is max, whatever it is. Okay, so you might as well have another variable called named age. So you can say const age, and then you assign a number. So let's say 23, and then you save it. Okay, so you can see yeah, you can see that age in this case is the variable name and the value is 23. Data type is something we're going to talk about in the next section. So now you know the variable name, the value assigned to the variable. So when you want to access that value, you simply reference. So we'll say reference. You make a reference to that variable by calling the name like we did here. So if you want to access this 23, we just say console.log and then we'll say age. So that way, what we're going to get in the console is the value that we assigned to the age variable. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so in JavaScript, there are some rules to follow when you are creating a variable name. So first of all, variable names, first of all, don't have spaces in them, so you can say first name. So this is not a valid variable name, so you cannot have space. It's always one single word, and that does not mean that you cannot think of for instance, if you say first name, looking at this, it's actually two words, first and name. Okay, so and it's a kind of hard to read like this. Imagine I say my first name. So looking at it first, it's kind of hard to read. So you use something called camel case when you want to when you want to use when you want to write variable names that joins multiple words together. So camel case means that the first letter of the first word, all the letters in the first word are lowercase, but the first letter of subsequent words will be capitalized, just like this. So this is what camel case means. So all the letters of the first word is lowercase, then for the subsequent words, the first letter should always be capital letter. So that way you're able to say, okay, this is my first name. Okay, so what if I remove this and I just want first name? Remember, the first word, all the letters will be lowercase. So this is going to be first name. Okay, so that's for when you want to use multiple words. as a variable name instead of adding this. So yep, so use camel case. Now another thing is a variable name cannot start with a number, so something like this, so you don't do that. A variable name has to be descriptive of the value that it holds. So if you say first name, we should be able to, I mean, it wouldn't make sense to say first name and then you come here and say 40. This does not make any sense. So when you're thinking about first name, you're thinking of in a real name, not some number, and the name is usually string of characters. Okay, so it should be descriptive of the value it holds. And talking about variable names being descriptive, this also doesn't make sense. While this works, it's not a good practice, right? So it's not descriptive enough. Okay, so yeah, so this is what you need to remember when you are naming variables. Okay, so next we are going to be talking about data types. Okay, so if you have any questions concerning variables, feel free to drop your question in the comment section and I will attend to it. So in the next video we're going to talk about data types. See you in the next video.